The silence hit Alex Mason first. Not the usual gentle quiet of their late afternoon Oak Ridge Estates cul-de-sac, but a hollow, unnerving void that seemed to emanate from the corner of their covered backyard patio. It was a silence that screamed absence. Leo, their 7-year-old son, usually a whirlwind of focused energy, as he engaged with his specialized array of therapy equipment, was standing stock still. He was a small, frozen statue near the glaringly empty space where his custom-built sensory integration swing, a cocoon of calming pressure and rhythmic movement, and his heavily weighted auditory dampening blanket, his shield against a world too loud should have been. His face, normally a canvas of quicksilver emotions, was pale-etched with a profound, heart-wrenching confusion that twisted Alex's gut into a tight, cold knot. Sarah, his wife, was already kneeling beside Leo, her hand resting on his rigid shoulder, her voice a low, anxious murmur that Alex couldn't quite decipher over the sudden roaring in his own ears. Her eyes, wide and dark with a rapidly dawning panic, were frantically scanning the patio, as if willing the missing items to reappear. The expensive, largely irreplaceable equipment, tools that were not mere playthings but vital, indispensable lifelines for Leo's daily functioning and complex neurological development, were simply gone. Vanished, as if the crisp, late autumn air had swallowed them whole. "They were right here, Alex," Sarah said, her voice trembling, rising in pitch, as Alex stepped out onto the patio, the cold knot in his stomach tightening with every beat of his heart. "Right here. I just brought Leo in for his snack not 45 minutes ago. The swing, the big blue blanket, even his communication tablet that was clipped to the swing frame, all of it. It's all gone." Leo, who lived with a complex, often bewildering form of autism spectrum disorder, coupled with significant sensory processing challenges that made the ordinary world a daily assault, couldn't articulate his mounting distress in words. His world was one of sensation, of pattern, of predictable comfort. The sudden, inexplicable void where his anchors had been was clearly a cataclysm. His rapidly escalating agitation, the frantic bird-like flapping of his hands, the low guttural moans building in his chest, a prelude to a full-blown, inconsolable meltdown, spoke volumes more eloquently than any words could. That equipment was his sanctuary, his safe space, the carefully curated, scientifically designed collection of tools that helped him navigate a world that often felt too loud, too bright, too chaotic, too overwhelmingly much. Each piece was either custom designed by specialists or heavily modified by Alex and Sarah themselves over years of painstaking trial and error, the result of countless consultations with occupational therapists, neurologists, and developmental pediatricians. They were not only incredibly expensive, with individual components costing thousands, but also carried agonizingly long lead times for replacement, sometimes months. Their absence was not a mere inconvenience. It was an immediate, profound crisis, a severing of his lifeline. Alex felt a wave of dizziness. He scanned the patio again, his mind struggling to process the impossible. Had a rogue gust of wind somehow? No. The swing frame was heavy, steel bolted. Had a delivery driver mistakenly? But nothing was scheduled. He ran a hand through his hair, his gaze sweeping the perimeter of their yard. The tall wooden fence, the locked gate leading to the side yard, the dense arborvitae hedge that separated their property from the meticulously manicured lawn next door. His eyes, against his will, drifted towards that neighboring property, the immaculate, almost unnervingly pristine domain of Ms. Janice Property Group. Ms. Property Group, the undisputed iron-willed president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, a woman whose obsession with community aesthetics and unwavering adherence to bylaws was the stuff of local legend, and not in a good way. She had a notorious, well-documented reputation for taking swift, unilateral, and often draconian action against anything, or anyone, she deemed unsightly, improperly stored, or in her frequently invoked, ominous phrase, detrimental to collective property values. A cold, sickening dread began to settle over Alex, heavy and suffocating. He had a terrible sinking feeling he knew exactly where this trail, this violation might lead. He was Alex Mason, loving husband, devoted father, currently feeling utterly helpless. The thought of confronting Ms. Property Group filled him with a weary resignation. He'd have to for Leo. He'd have to swallow his frustration and ask politely. Their move to Oakridge Estates 18 months prior had been a carefully, almost agonizingly considered decision, a desperate quest for a supportive, understanding environment for Leo. The neighborhood on paper had boasted everything they were looking for: excellent public schools with well-regarded special education programs, a crucial proximity to Leo's specialized therapy center, and a glossy reputation for being a safe, tranquil, family-oriented community. The thick, intimidatingly dense HOA covenant, with its seemingly endless pedantic stipulations on everything from mailbox design and paint color to lawn ornamentation and the precise species of approved shrubbery, had seemed at the time a small, manageable price to pay for the perceived benefits of stability and support. Leo's therapy equipment, while undeniably extensive and somewhat unconventional in appearance, was always stored neatly and discreetly on their covered back patio, shielded from the elements, and they had naively believed largely out of direct public view. It was an integral, non-negotiable part of his daily routine, essential for his emotional regulation, his sensory integration, his ability to learn, and his overall neurophysical development. Without it, he was prone to severe, often prolonged meltdowns, debilitating anxiety, and a profound, heartbreaking inability to cope with the simplest of everyday stimuli. Ms. Janice Property Group, a woman whose perfectly coiffed, helmet-like silver hair and impeccably tailored severe business suits seemed perpetually jarringly at odds with the relaxed suburban setting, had made her formidable presence known almost immediately after they moved in. There had been a series of polite but unmistakably firm, friendly reminders delivered via crisply printed notes left in their mailbox regarding the precise ruler-straight placement of their recycling bins, the unapproved, overly vibrant shade of their welcome mat, and most woundingly, the excessive and potentially disruptive exuberance of Leo's joyful but occasionally loud vocalizations when he was particularly happy or excited by a new discovery. Once, a neighbor, old Mrs. Gable from across the street, a kind woman who always had a smile for Leo, had quietly mentioned to Sarah, "Oh, Janice has her ways, dear. Lost a lovely bird bath myself last spring. Said it violated subsection 4, paragraph B, non-approved statuary. Just vanished one day while I was at the market. Never did see it again." At the time, Sarah had sympathized, but it had seemed a minor, albeit irritating eccentricity. Now Mrs. Gable's words echoed with a more sinister resonance. Each interaction with Ms. Property Group had left Alex and Sarah with a growing, deeply uncomfortable sense of unease, a persistent, unpleasant feeling of being constantly scrutinized, measured, and judged against some unspoken, unattainable standard of sterile, suburban perfection. They had learned through bitter experience to navigate Ms. Property Group's reign with extreme caution, keeping their property meticulously tidy, almost obsessively so, and trying to avoid any direct confrontation, which invariably left them feeling diminished and frustrated. But the disappearance of Leo's vital therapy equipment, an act of such breathtaking, callous disregard for a vulnerable child's profound and undeniable needs, felt like a deliberate, targeted escalation, a cruel crossing of an uncrossable line. That evening, after Leo, utterly overwrought, inconsolable, and stripped of his familiar comforts, had finally cried himself into an exhausted, fitful, whimpering sleep. In Sarah's arms, Alex and Sarah sat in their dimly lit kitchen, the silence heavy, with a potent cocktail of helpless anger, suffocating anxiety, and a growing righteous fury. "This has to be her, Alex," Sarah said, her voice tight with unshed tears and simmering emotion, her hands clenched so tightly around a cold mug of tea that her knuckles were white. Who else? Who else would do something like this? Who else would even think of seeing Leo's vital equipment as clutter to be removed? It's monstrous. "I don't know, Sar." Alex sighed, rubbing his temples. The rational part of his brain struggled to comprehend such malice. It's just stuff. Why would anyone steal it? It's so specific to Leo." "Maybe they didn't steal it to use it," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide. "Maybe they just took it to make a point, because it was unsightly, because it didn't fit her perfect little Oakridge Estates mold." "I'm going to speak with her first thing tomorrow," Alex stated, his jaw tight. He felt a deep, weary reluctance. He wasn't a confrontational person by nature, and Ms. Property Group was an expert at making reasonable people feel small and foolish. "I'll keep it civil, of course. I'll approach it as a concerned parent just looking for some lost property, hoping for some help. But I need to see her face, gauge her reaction, hear what she says, and more importantly, what she doesn't say. He knew that a direct accusation without a shred of concrete proof would be utterly counterproductive, likely resulting in more official HOA harassment. But the thought of Ms. Property Group callously disposing of, or worse, somehow profiting from his son's essential life-altering medical tools filled him with a cold, determined rage he hadn't felt in years. He would find that equipment, he vowed silently. And if she was responsible, if she had inflicted this pain on his son, on his family, he would find a way to make her answer for it. He just didn't know how yet. The next morning, Alex, his heart pounding with a mixture of dread and resolve, approached Ms. Property Group's imposing perfectly manicured residence. It was a monument to conformity, every shrub pruned to within an inch of its life, every blade of grass seemingly standing at attention. She was, as she often was on weekday mornings in her driveway, supervising a landscaping crew with the focused hawk-like intensity of a field marshal directing a crucial military operation, her voice sharp and critical as she pointed out some infinitesimal flaw in the alignment of a newly laid paving stone. Ms. Property Group. Alex began forcing his tone to be carefully neutral, even deferential. Good morning. I was hoping you might be able to help us. Some of my son Leo's specialized therapy equipment seems to have gone missing from our back patio sometime yesterday afternoon. It's quite distinctive, a large blue sensory swing, a weighted blanket, his communication tablet. We were wondering if perhaps it was mistakenly removed during some sort of routine community cleanup that we weren't aware of, or if perhaps someone on the HOA grounds crew might have seen it or moved it. Ms. Property Group turned slowly, deliberately, her expression one of carefully cultivated, impatient condescension, as if he were a particularly bothersome insect. Mr. Mason, isn't it? From number 17, the Miller residence. No Mason. She tapped a perfectly manicured blood-red fingernail against her chin, a gesture that somehow managed to be both thoughtful and dismissive. Therapy equipment, you say? A delicate arch of a silver eyebrow. I recall no community cleanup scheduled for yesterday, Mr. Mason. The HOA is meticulous in its communications regarding such matters. And as for your son's, accoutrements... Her gaze flickered with something Alex couldn't quite name. Distaste. I must confess I have noticed on several occasions during my routine community inspections a rather, shall we say, unsightly accumulation of what appears to be oversized playthings and various paraphernalia on your patio. Oakridge Estates, as you know, prides itself on maintaining a certain level of aesthetic standard, Mr. Mason. Items of that nature, if not properly and discreetly stored out of sight, can indeed be perceived as neighborhood blight, significantly impacting the property values of your neighbors. It's a matter of considerable concern to many residents, I assure you. This isn't blight, Ms. Property Group. Alex said, his voice hardening, despite his desperate resolve to remain calm, to not give her any ammunition. It is essential medical and therapeutic equipment, absolutely vital for my disabled son's well-being and development. It was on our private covered patio, shielded from view, and now it's gone. Ms. Property Group's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, her lips thinning into a moue of displeasure. Well, I certainly have no knowledge of its current whereabouts, Mr. Mason. Perhaps young Leo misplaced it himself during one of his episodes. Children can be quite forgetful, can't they? Especially those with certain developmental challenges. Her tone was syrupy, yet laced with venom. Or perhaps, she added, her voice taking on a distinctly sharper, more accusatory edge, if you were more diligent in securing your valuable possessions and adhering to the clearly stipulated community standards regarding exterior property maintenance and storage, these unfortunate situations wouldn't arise. I would suggest you check the local lost and found, or perhaps reconsider the suitability of leaving such items exposed and unattended. The HOA, Mr. Mason, cannot and will not be held responsible for the consequences of residents' negligence or their failure to comply with established community bylaws. With a curt, dismissive nod that signaled the end of the conversation, she turned back to berate the unfortunate landscapers about the precise angulation of a newly planted ornamental grass, leaving Alex standing there, his ears burning his frustration and helpless anger mounting to a boiling point. Her denial was too smooth, too rehearsed. Her accusations too pointed, too cruel. Her utter lack of empathy, of basic human decency, was profound and chilling. He walked away, feeling smaller, angrier, and more determined than ever. The first truly shocking incident in this escalating conflict occurred 2 agonizing days later. 2 days during which Leo's world had shrunk, his anxiety a constant thrumming presence, his meltdowns more frequent and intense. Having received absolutely no cooperation, not even a shred of sympathy from Ms. Property Group, and with Leo's distress growing daily without his familiar grounding tools, Alex and Sarah had, with heavy hearts, filed a formal police report for the stolen equipment. They provided the responding officer with detailed descriptions, photographs, and estimated values, which ran into several thousands of dollars. The officer had been polite but non-committal, taking notes and promising to look into it, which Alex knew from grim experience with bureaucracy likely meant very little. Desperate for any lead, Sarah also posted a polite, carefully worded inquiry on the official Oakridge Estates HOA online forum, asking if anyone had perhaps seen the missing items or had any information, however small, about their disappearance. The response from Ms. Property Group, posted publicly on the forum for all residents to see, was swift, brutal, and utterly astonishing in its audacity. She accused the Masons of a deliberate and malicious attempt to circumvent established HOA protocols and grievance procedures by prematurely involving external authorities in a matter of internal community standards. She further accused them of falsely and irresponsibly implying malfeasance or negligence on the part of the HOA or its duly appointed representatives. Fawach. And then, in a breathtaking display of vindictive power, she issued the Masons an official notice of bylaw violation for improper and unsightly storage of oversized, non-approved personal items on exterior property, thereby creating an aesthetic nuisance and negatively impacting neighborhood ambiance, accompanied by a hefty $200 fine payable within 7 days. She was not only denying any knowledge of the theft, she was actively publicly punishing them for seeking help and for the very offense, their son's disability and his need for adaptive equipment, that had in all likelihood led to the equipment being stolen in the first place. It was a breathtaking, almost theatrical display of gaslighting and retaliatory aggression, clearly designed to intimidate them into silence and to discredit them within the community. The second shocking incident, the one that truly galvanized Alex and began to nudge him towards a path he hadn't wanted to consider, happened the following weekend. Sarah, her anxiety, now a constant gnawing companion, had been obsessively, almost compulsively scouring online marketplaces, Facebook, Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist, local classifieds, clinging to the faintest, most desperate hope that perhaps the equipment had been mistakenly picked up by sanitation workers, and someone was now trying to return it, or more cynically, trying to sell it. Late Saturday night, as Alex was trying to distract himself with a book he couldn't focus on, Sarah let out a sharp, strangled cry from the living room. "Alex, Alex, come here. Look at this. Oh my God, look at this." He rushed in to find her staring at her laptop screen, her face pale, her hand trembling as she pointed. There on Facebook Marketplace was a new listing, posted only an hour earlier, gently used children's special needs swing and sensory blanket set, excellent condition, like new must go, ASAP bargain price. The photographs accompanying the listing, though taken from slightly awkward downward angles, presumably with a cell phone, were unmistakably sickeningly of Leo's custom-built swing frame and his unique weighted blanket. The distinctive deep blue quilted fabric of the blanket, the specific pattern of the webbing on the swing's support structure, the small, almost invisible modifications Alex himself had made to the frame. There was absolutely no doubt. It was Leo's. The seller's profile was vague, almost anonymous, using a generic folksy name, Jenny's Treasures, with no personal information visible, no friends, no history. But the background in one of the photographs, a partially visible, uniquely patterned patio umbrella, and a distinctive, ornate terracotta planter filled with vibrant red geraniums, looked chillingly, horrifyingly familiar. It looked an awful lot like Ms. Janice Property Group's meticulously curated award-winning backyard oasis, a space she had proudly showcased in several glossy photographs in the HOA newsletter's Garden of the Month section. She wouldn't dare. Alex breathed a cold, venomous fury, unlike anything he had ever experienced, rising within him, choking him. She couldn't possibly be that brazen, that That's stupid. But the evidence, however circumstantial at this stage, was compelling, sickeningly so. Ms. Property Group, it appeared, had not merely callously disposed of Leo's essential equipment as unsightly clutter to be hauled away with the trash. She had stolen it, valuable medically necessary equipment, and was now attempting to sell it to profit from his son's disability from their family's pain. This transformed her actions from petty HOA tyranny and callous, breathtaking indifference into calculated, premeditated criminal theft. This was no longer just a matter of bylaws and neighborhood disputes. This was a crime, a serious crime. The midpoint of this unfolding nightmarish drama arrived as Alex Mason, feeling a profound shift within himself, began to meticulously, almost obsessively unravel the digital trail behind Jenny's treasures. His initial attempts to engage with the seller through Facebook Messenger, posing as an interested buyer named Mike R., to elicit more information or arrange a viewing, were met with cautious, clipped, non-committal responses. Jenny was evasive about the exact location for pickup, insisting on a public meeting place in a neighboring town for safety reasons, and refused to provide any further details about the equipment's origins, stating only that it was from a recent house clearance selling for a friend. Alex, though he felt like he was operating in a fog of rage and disbelief, knew he had to be smart. He carefully saved screenshots of the listing, the photos, the messages. He printed everything out. He thought about going back to the police, but the first officer had seemed so disinterested. What more could he tell them? That he suspected his neighbor based on a blurry photo of an umbrella, he felt a surge of profound helplessness. He wasn't a cop. He didn't have special powers. He was just a dad out of his depth, desperate to get his son's lifeline back. He stared at the enlarged photo of the umbrella and the planter again and again. He remembered those HOA newsletters. Sarah kept them in a pile in the kitchen drawer. He found the issue with Ms. Property Group's garden feature. He held the printed marketplace photo next to the newsletter image. His breath hitched. The umbrella pattern was identical. The terracotta planter, with its distinctive scrolled design and the same chip on the rim, was identical. Even the way the geranium spilled over the edge. It was her backyard. There was no doubt. But what could he do with this march over there? Accuse her, she'd deny it. Laugh in his face. Probably call the police on him for harassment. He felt a fresh wave of despair. He needed more. He needed something undeniable. Frustrated, he typed Jenny's Treasures, Oakridge Estates into a wider internet search, not expecting much. To his astonishment, several other listings popped up on different smaller classified sites, all under the same seller name. A high-end set of golf clubs, barely used, owner moved overseas, a nearly new pressure washer, spring cleaning bargain, a child's expensive-looking bicycle, outgrown too fast. He stared at the bicycle. It looked familiar. He remembered young Timmy Henderson from down the street crying a few months ago because his new birthday bike had disappeared from their driveway after his dad had received an HOA notice about improperly stored recreational equipment. Mr. Henderson, a quiet, nervous man who always seemed to be tiptoeing around, had grumbled to Alex at the time about Ms. Property Group being a tyrant, but had said he couldn't prove anything. A chilling thought began to form in Alex's mind. What if Leo's equipment wasn't the first? What if Jenny's Treasures wasn't just a one-off attempt to sell Leo's things, but something bigger, a pattern? He felt a prickle of unease that had nothing to do with his own situation. This felt organized. He knew he couldn't handle this alone. The next morning, Alex took all his printed evidence, the photos, the messages, the links to other Jenny's Treasures listings, his notes about Timmy Henderson's bike, and went to the city police headquarters. He asked to speak to someone in the property crimes unit. He waited for nearly an hour, feeling increasingly foolish, like he was making a mountain out of a molehill. Finally, a tired-looking detective named Kowalski called him in. Alex laid out his story, his voice shaking slightly, as he explained about Leo, about Ms. Property Group, about Jenny's Treasures. Kowalski listened, patiently looked through the papers, his expression unreadable. "This is interesting, Mr. Mason," Kowalski said, finally tapping the photo of Ms. Property Group's umbrella. "A lot of coincidences. You understand, without more, it's circumstantial." I know, Alex said, his shoulders slumping. "But my son, he needs that equipment. And if she's doing this to other people, Kowalski nodded slowly. Tell you what, leave this with me. We can run a few checks on this Jenny's Treasures profile, see if we can get an IP address, maybe a linked bank account for payouts from the sales sites. It's a long shot, but we'll take a look. Don't get your hopes up, though. These things can be hard to trace. Alex thanked him, feeling a tiny sliver of hope, but mostly a vast ocean of continued dread. He had done all he could as a civilian. Now it was out of his hands. Days turned into a week. Leo's condition deteriorated. He was withdrawn, anxious, barely sleeping. Sarah was a wreck. Alex felt like he was failing his family. He called Detective Kowalski twice. The first time Kowalski was out. The second he said, "Still looking into it, Mr. Mason. These things take time." Then on a Tuesday morning, nearly 10 days after he'd first spoken to Kowalski, his phone rang. It was the detective. "Mr. Mason Kowalski, we got something. That Jenny's Treasures profile. We managed to subpoena the platform records, the bank account linked for payments. It's registered to one Janus Property Group 14, Oak Drive, Oak Ridge Estates. We also cross-referenced with reports of missing items from your HOA forum going back 2 years. Several items, Jenny's Treasures, sold match descriptions of things confiscated or lost after HOA warnings. This looks like more than just your son's swing. We're putting together a warrant application now. It seems your Ms. Property Group might be running a nice little side hustle." Alex felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees, followed by a surge of cold, hard anger. "What happens now?" "We execute the warrant soon. Could you be available to identify your son's property if we find it? And Mr. Mason, given your personal involvement, it's probably best you're not present during the initial entry, but we'll need you." The climax was set for that very afternoon. Alex felt a strange detachment, as if he were watching events unfold from a great distance. He and Sarah stayed at home, pacing, waiting. He'd given Kowalski exact descriptions of every unique mark on Leo's equipment. Around 3 p.m., Alex saw them. 2 unmarked police cars and a standard patrol unit pulling quietly into their cul-de-sac parking a little way down from Ms. Property Group's house. He watched from his window as Kowalski and 3 other plainclothes officers, plus 2 uniformed officers, walked up Ms. Property Group's pristine driveway. He saw Kowalski knock. He saw Ms. Property Group open the door. Her expression, even from this distance, one of regal impatience. He saw Kowalski show her a document, and then all hell seemed to break loose. Ms. Property Group's voice, shrill and furious, carried across the street. "A warrant! This is an outrage, harassment. I am the president of this homeowners association. I will not be subjected to this indignity. I'll have your badges." Suddenly she tried to slam the door. One of the uniformed officers put his foot in the way. Then through her open doorway, Alex saw her lunge towards a small desk just inside her foyer. "She's going for something." Kowalski's voice boomed. The officers moved in quickly. There was a brief scuffle, more shouting. Then Ms. Property Group was being let out. Her silver hair disheveled her expensive suit, rumpled one hand cuffed behind her back, while an officer struggled with the other. She was screaming now, not just threats, but something else. "It wasn't just me," Henderson knew. "Arthur Henderson, your precious HOA treasurer. He took things too. He has gambling debts, the pathetic fool. I have records. On my laptop. He helped me. He took the boy's swing, the heavy things. I told him where to list them. You think I did this alone?" Arthur Henderson. The meek, nervous little man who always looked like a startled rabbit, Alex felt a fresh wave of sickness. As Ms. Property Group was being guided, still shrieking accusations towards a patrol car, Kowalski's team began their search. Neighbors were starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. Mrs. Gable was on her porch, her hand over her mouth. Young Timmy Henderson's father, David, not Arthur, came out looking bewildered. Then Arthur Henderson himself emerged from his house 2 doors down, his face ashen. He saw the police at Ms. Property Group's, heard her shouts about him, and he froze. He looked like he was about to bolt. One of Kowalski's detectives saw the look on his face, and started walking purposefully towards him. Henderson didn't run. He just crumpled onto his own driveway, his head in his hands, sobbing. Later, Kowalski called Alex. "You're not going to believe the hoard we found in her basement, Mr. Mason. It's like an illicit department store. And yes, your son's swing and blanket are here wrapped in plastic. Looks like she was getting ready to ship them. As for Henderson, he confessed. Apparently, Property Group had him over a barrel, knew about his gambling and some irregularities with the HOA accounts he was trying to cover up. She used him as her muscle for the heavier items, gave him a small cut. He's the one who physically took your son's things from your patio. Said he felt terrible about it, but was too scared of her. Both of them are in custody. The immediate aftermath of Janus Property Group's and Arthur Henderson's arrests sent seismic shockwaves through Oakridge Estates. The carefully cultivated veneer of suburban tranquility was shattered, replaced by a maelstrom of disbelief, anger, and eventually a profound sense of betrayal. As details of the charges emerged, felony theft operating a criminal enterprise, conspiracy fraud for Property Group, theft by unlawful taking, and conspiracy for Henderson, the community's stunned silence gave way to a torrent of outrage and a flood of previously suppressed stories. Dozens of residents came forward recounting tales of mysteriously disappeared items following minor HOA infractions, items they now realized had likely ended up in Jenny's treasures or adorning Ms. Property Group's own home. Leo's therapy equipment was carefully recovered, cataloged, and returned within days. The sheer unadulterated joy on Leo's face, his wordless coos of delight, as he reacquainted himself with the familiar textures and pressures of his swing and blanket, was a balm to Alex and Sarah's raw nerves. Some smaller components of his communication tablet were damaged, but the essential pieces were back where they belonged. The Oakridge Estates HOA imploded. An emergency meeting saw the remaining board members resign en masse. An interim committee, which included a skeptical Mrs. Gable and David Henderson. Timmy's father, no relation to Arthur, and a lawyer was formed to clean up the mess, rewrite the bylaws, and restore some semblance of trust. The legal proceedings were complex. Ms. Property Group, faced with overwhelming evidence, including detailed ledgers found on her computer outlining her 5-year illicit sales operation, nicknamed Operation HOA Hall, by a wry Detective Kowalski, eventually pleaded guilty. She received a significant prison sentence, substantial restitution orders, and a lifetime ban from any fiduciary roles. Arthur Henderson, cooperating fully and expressing profound remorse, received a lesser sentence involving probation, community service, and restitution for the items he personally stole. He publicly apologized to the Masons and to the community, a broken man. Months later, life in Oakridge Estates had found a new, more cautious, but ultimately kinder rhythm. One sunny Saturday, Alex watched from his patio as Leo, giggling, showed a group of neighborhood children how his sensory swing could also be a spaceship. Young Timmy Henderson, his own stolen bicycle now recovered and returned, was first in line for a ride. Sarah brought out cookies. Mrs. Gable waved from her porch, where a new, slightly smaller, but defiantly present bird bath now stood. Alex Mason leaned back, a small tired smile on his face. He was just a father who, pushed to the brink, had done what any parent would do: fight for his child. He had stumbled through darkness, armed with little more than a father's love and a desperate hope for justice. And somehow, with the help of a good detective and the unraveling of a web of greed, they had found their way back to the light. The world was still a complicated place, and people were capable of both great cruelty and surprising kindness. But today, in his small corner of it, the laughter of children, including his own precious son, was the only sound that mattered, that he thought was a victory worth more than all of Jenny's treasures combined.